Wearable technology covets after one thing: the real estate on our bodies.
Wearables has always been part of the customer imagination, right? You've seen in these, movies or books.
Before sci-fi, it was the Swiss that captured our wrists with their engineering. Then the Japanese brought us into the digital. And in less than 2 decades, we've gone from gimmick to game changer.
We thought, how do we change the behavior of tens of millions of people around the world?
And we start off with, how do we help you lose weight? Then it was like, you saved my life because I saw this condition.
We want to improve people's lifestyle. We want to improve their performance.
The holy grail of wearables is a device you shouldn't ever leave the house without.
Today's breakthrough innovations have brought wearables out of the fringes and onto our bodies as mainstays, measuring and analyzing everything from our steps to our health. Never before have we been more aware of how many steps we've taken, the amount of sleep we're getting, or the calories we're consuming. And that's in part thanks to Fitbit, humble startup to now wearable titan. The company boasts 31 million active users and ships an average of 12.9 million devices a year around the world.
By the time I started Fitbit, actually one of the reasons I started it was I was really out of shape.
This is James Park, CEO and co-founder of Fitbit and the man who got America moving.
There really wasn't anything super advanced that would help someone who wasn't fit become more active or take that next step. So we thought, how do we start with the concept of the pedometer and make it 10 times better and change the behavior of tens of millions of people around the world?
It's a tall order. As we know, habits die hard. But if done right, it will mean a bite out of a burgeoning market worth almost $100 billion by 2025. But to motivate us to get moving, what do we, consumers, need from our wearables?
I really like to know what my pulse is like. I have this obsession about having a very low pulse.
Oh, and alert me when I'm not moving.
Like, okay, you need to stand and stretch and not just have a bad posture.
If the smartwatch just detected that the person is not breathing or not moving for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, maybe it will just alert emergency contact.
For a single device to meet all these demands requires a complex architecture of sensors and microprocessors. Simple on the outside, but essentially a powerful computer on the inside. And it's come a long way. The precursors to what we know today begins in 70s Japan, who disrupted the analog timekeeping scene with their then radical new development, quartz.
The quartz movement is sort of a weird term for putting a battery in a watch, but that's what happened.
James Stables is a tech journalist and the founder of tech news site Wearable. He's worn every wearable since 2014.
Watches could run off batteries, and that made them cheaper and more accessible. So these sort of Swiss watchmakers really were put into the shadows. Quartz put watches on the wrists of people who couldn't afford or wouldn't have wanted to wear watches before.
Battery-powered ticking took hold of millions of wrists, leading innovators to create gadgetry that were in equal parts groundbreaking and equal parts crazy. There's the Seiko TV watch of 1982. While outlandish, it proved useful for James Bond. Microsoft in 1994 gave us the Timex Data Link, the first watch capable of downloading data from a computer wirelessly. This had real-world impact, employed by astronauts on space missions. The year 1999 saw Samsung debut its first calling-enabled smartwatch with 90 minutes of talk time. And in 2003, Microsoft debuted another game-changing device.
If you come into the early 2000s, you have the Microsoft Spot. If you look at their spec sheets and their feature sheets, look very similar to the promises of some basic smartwatches today, and this is in 2003. But again, the rest of technology wasn't there, or the need there, and of course, they stuttered and fell by the wayside as well.
While these wild wrist ideas looked more like stuff of sci-fi, these legacies inform the design and technology tech companies will come to employ. One of them being global GPS innovator Garmin.
I didn't change my job But actually, I feel I change my job every 1 or 2 years.
This is Gopin Lin, director of Garmin Asia, whose first job was with Garmin over 20 years ago.
The wearable market to Garmin was from a very interesting accident.
This accident begins with this device, the Gecko, released in 2003. With the cellular phone trend taking off, Garmin wanted a handheld device of their own.
People doesn't really like La Prada, so suddenly we have a lot of inventory. So one of our engineers, she had the idea, can we just change the shape of this device from handheld to the wrist-based device.
Garmin already had the tech in its toolkit to develop a novel wearable. It was a well-established market leader in satellite navigational technology. Their game-changing gadgets marked the end of foldable maps altogether. But investing in a wearable would mean entering a subgenre of tech marred by commercial failures.
We only accept technologies when there's a benefit to us, and if these benefits are just small, pointless gimmicks, then people aren't going to get on board.
At that time, Garmin really was doing super well. You know, they had virtually no long-term debt. They had a really robust balance sheet. And so they had a lot of flexibility to go into different business segments.
The team decided to test the waters and focus on a targeted group to become a runner's best friend. At that point, runners only had a stopwatch and a map to calculate their performance. The engineer that discovered Garmin's next move was a runner, and she wanted a device that could track her performance. The engineering team wanted to convince their co-founder, Dr. Min Kao, that it was possible for the product to be successful.
I know one concern from Dr. Min Kao is the appearance. He doesn't think the appearance of this kind of wearable watch is what people want to wear on their wrist.
It didn't help that the company had a culture of outsourcing nothing. It would have to manufacture all parts necessary for the device end to end, raising the stakes.
We have many different market segments. If we want to outsource everything, the quantity will be very, very small. So that's very difficult to outsource to any manufacturing partner. I would say every new product line, the cost would not be cheap to us.
Garmin did pour fierce investment into research and development. In 2003, the company's R&D expenditures reached almost $44 million. By contrast, navigation competitor of the time, Lowrance, spent just over $4 million. After just a few months of trial and error, Garmin debuted the Forerunner 101. The size was cumbersome, mainly since it ran on 2 AAA-sized batteries.
Some runner told me in order to finish their marathon before the battery died, they have to run faster.
I mean, it looks mad. It was huge on the wrist and only produced a small amount of data. There wasn't actually a way of syncing it to the computer at all. But it really hit home with a subsection of runners and athletes who were hungry for this data.
The response garnered from this niche group was enough proof to push ahead. Garmin listened and iterated, pushing out the 201, compatible with rechargeable batteries and the PC.
Garmin really were the first to sort of pioneer that data. They've managed to associate themselves as a sports wearable brand and managed to insulate themselves from other bigger names coming in.
And come in they did. Technological advancement brought about great innovation. Gadgets became more powerful, devices more compact, made possible because chips shrank from the size of your palm to the size of a fingernail. All this giving rise to a player who wanted to give wearables a new facelift.
I was a heavy gamer, and I was just fascinated by the way Nintendo had taken sensors and turned it into something very active and positive. How do we help families become more active and have fun together? And we just really wanted to capture that magic.
And this magic, to get a nation moving, was exactly what America needed. Obesity has long been an epidemic in America since the 1980s. It's a condition responsible for increased risk in diabetes, cancer, and heart disease. By the late 2000s, a third of Americans were obese. The problem was also imminent in fast-developing Asia. Singapore saw 1 in 9 adults obese. Thailand saw 1 in 10. The world needed a corrective. We needed an effective way to take stock of our lifestyles.
I was a big fan of walking. I was part of a walking group at that time.
This is Fitbit's first hire, Eric Friedman, co-founder and CTO of Fitbit.
People want that magic pill that's going to make them skinny and a superstar athlete and get rid of all disease. I'd love for that to exist, but it's a constant fight. And so how do we kind of get you thinking about your health and getting people addicted to actually movement? That was really exciting.
So the mandate was to incentivize a nation to get up and move. No sweat. In order to capture our wrists, Fitbit would need to push the boundaries in design and innovation of fitness tracking. When it comes to our well-being, we've been passed down over generations a slew of proverbial wisdoms to guide us into living a healthy life. Breakfast, the most important meal. An apple a day keeping the doctor away. The 8 glasses of water a day. 2009 marks the year that would bring another health benchmark into our lexicon, the 10,000 steps a day.
10,000 steps is so synonymous with all of wearables. If you go out there and ask someone how many steps they should be getting a day, 10,000 will be the answer, because it has that great mix of sounding scary and being quite easy to achieve.
But how did this idea of the 10,000 steps, or counting steps for that matter, become such a part of our lives? Well, while it's debatable, one could date it as far back as 500 years ago, to Leonardo da Vinci, who sketched a wheelbarrow-like design to count steps. Or it could have been the Swiss inventor, Abraham Louis Perrelet, who back then had inbuilt a way to count steps in a watch. Or British national John Harwood, who was awarded the patent of the pedometer in 1924. But it would be 40 years later, in the 1960s, that we see the pedometer being promoted en masse as a fitness device.
It's just a number plucked out of the air by Japanese scientists around the 1965 Olympics, trying to promote their own pedometer.
Somehow the number still stuck. So much so that over the years, high-profile health organizations, including the World Health Organization and the American Heart Foundation, have all adopted the notion of the 10,000 steps.
10,000 steps.
10,000 steps. 10,000 steps. 10,000 steps.
10,000 steps.
Fitbit wanted to cash in on this concept. They just needed to find a way to bring the pedometer into the 21st century.
We decided to focus the product and service a little bit geared towards women, because we felt that was the group of people that were really underserved by technology and health and fitness.
We found that Clip was probably a better place to get the type of data we wanted. The focus group was like, the women were like, wait, we actually want to clip it to our bra. And that never occurred to James and myself. James and I went to a local department store and with a pair of calipers, calipered a whole bunch of clothing and waistbands. How does it get over the right piece of clothing, and how can it be wearable and comfortable? And we didn't realize just how difficult it would be when we started.
Worse, money was running out.
We raised a few $100,000, and we thought that would take us to launch. We totally underestimated it. It did take us to our first prototype, and that's what we took on stage at our first big public demo of the product, which was TechCrunch 50.
We're here at TechCrunch.
The plan was James was going to kind of ask the audience, how many steps should he take? He was going to walk, and then bang, was magically going to appear on the website. In the middle of this whole thing, the computer crashed. And so while James is busy doing his 17 steps, I'm busy restarting the computer, getting the sync programs back up and running. So it turned out it was a lot more heart-stopping than we expected.
Fitbit is a device and a website. It helps you become aware of how active you are, what you eat, and motivates you to live a healthier life.
Panic aside, Fitbit made it work on stage. The demo went well, and they hoped their pitch was good enough to pique interest.
Before the event, we put a bet together. It's like, oh, how many pre-orders are we going to get? Our 2 bets, I think both were under 20. But I think by the end of the first day, we had a couple thousand pre-orders. We were stunned, and we thought absolutely had legs. So the next challenge was, how do we get all this stuff built?
Enter the next problem. Both founders come from software backgrounds. Neither of them had any hardware manufacturing experience.
We assumed, hardware, just a bunch of chips, we would all build Legos, How hard can it be? It turns out it took us a lot of work to find the right manufacturing partner. We'd spend months in Asia. I had taken a couple months of Chinese, and we'd go up and say, can you do this type of thing? Factory owner would turn to his chief engineer and say, kui, can you? And the chief engineer would think about it and go, bukri, and they'd have this back and forth. Kui, bukri, no, we can't do it. And then they'd eventually turn to us and go, no problem. Those were not the people we ended up working with. We need someone who's technically competent, but yet willing to take on a smaller client.
Their designs were complicated, requiring more than 100 electronic components and 22 plastic and metal parts. Manufacturing them and then making them work together proved more complex than thought, and time was running out. The customers that took a chance on Fitbit at TechCrunch were promised to have their gadgets by Christmas. Delays saw them miss crucial sales during the shopping holidays.
There were lots of crises, and we'd finally built the very first Fitbit. And the thing was supposed to sync over about a 30-foot distance. That was the magic of Fitbit. And we had about 2 millimeters of range. Oh my God, we spent all of our money. It doesn't deliver on its fundamental promise.
The miniaturization of the form factor, making it water resistant, that was actually a big challenge. The wireless technology was fairly new for the time, the way we're using it. So it was scary pretty much going right up to launch.
After a year's delay, form and function finally came together just before Christmas of 2009, and the duo launched and shipped their first batch of wearable devices.
It was definitely more premium than pedometers, but way more accessible than some of these advanced watches, so we felt that it was a good compromise.
Fitbit's price and novelty sparked a spree. The initial 5,000 units they shipped turned into 20,000 more orders in just a few months. But the founders knew that if they wanted to shift to bigger volumes, they'll need bigger partners. Soon after, Fitbit clinched a deal with mega US retailer Best Buy. What started with trackers in 4 humble stores turned to 40, then to 650.
These devices, they told us things about ourselves that we just didn't know. I think there was a curiosity about ourselves that wearables were just really well placed to pick up on.
Consumers have been trained to expect something new every year. I think it's good for innovation. It puts a lot of pressure on companies to really think about how to push everything forward and do it at such an incredible cadence.
Besides the high anticipation from customers, with a brand new investment of $8 million in 2010, expectations were high. 1 year later, Fitbit launched Ultra.
Some see a dash to work. We see a path to fitness. Because we see every step as a step toward better fitness.
This was the year smartphones officially outsold personal computers, allowing social media to play a bigger role in our lives.
We created a leaderboard where you could compete with people, friends and family across a variety of metrics. Even people who weren't very competitive really got motivated by this fact that, I'm trying to beat my friends at getting 10,000 steps per day. And so that social element was actually a key driver of our growth.
The accelerometer can help track how many flights of stairs you walk each day.
With Fitbit Ultra, it was really about giving people credit for going uphill in terms of driving the whole all the metabolic process in your body.
In a singular dashboard, Ultra is capable of tracking and capturing data on your eating and sleeping habits, and naturally, your physical activity. And to better foster community within Fitbit's users, the information is made public. What Fitbit didn't expect was just how much detail into physical activity some users would track.
There are some people that decided to log their extracurricular nighttime activities, to put it diplomatically. So all of this stuff, it was already public, but then getting indexed by a search engine made it even more public. And so we invested a lot more in not only in privacy controls, but more importantly, the defaults at which these privacy settings were configured at. I think that's when we really leaned into things that would proactively protect the privacy of our users as it related to their health data.
Fitbit's private data has also proven useful in a number of interesting ways. It's exposed infidelity, revealed pregnancies, and when subpoenaed, solved crimes. But this explosion of data was made possible through the digital revolution that gave us the smartphone. The game-changing product that was going to put a computer in everyone's hand. And paired with the launch of Google Maps, it was on a collision course with dedicated sat-nav devices like Garmin's.
I think the main challenge for them at that time was trying to figure out where to take the business.
This is Hyunjin Kim, former co-founder of an early-stage venture capital fund, now business strategy educator at INSEAD.
I think Garmin had more choices in front of them than some of their other competitors. They were already in this niche and had quite a lot of room to grow this niche. Now, I think what was probably uncertain at that time was how big was this niche going to be?
Garmin wasn't going to be swallowed up, not on their watch, and it would be wearables that put Garmin back in the driver's seat.
Due to the vertical integration, we can share a lot of technology. We can leverage display technology applied to marine, to outdoor, to handheld, to wearable device. We can use the same technology to different product line, different product segment, different market segment.
With a 10-year lead into wearables, their strategy was to diversify and conquer. In 2012, they set their sights high. Garmin launched the Phoenix series dedicated to alpinists. It reached new depths with swimmers. They diversified into golfing. Garmin even went on to target soldiers, creating the tactics range.
It's especially extraordinary in some ways is that they were able to survive the smartphone, GPS transition. Wearables was something that they had capabilities around and a customer segment around that really recognized the quality of the technology that they were developing. So it made a lot of sense to focus in on that niche and grow it.
They've identified that runners and golfers and triathletes don't want 3 or 4 hour battery life when you're GPS tracking. You want to take that into 12, 24, 48 hours of tracking. So they've really advanced their wearables in terms of the battery life. It's just something that the big smartwatch players just haven't really mastered at all.
Garmin's strategy to target niche markets also informed their marketing efforts. They targeted their watches based on the sports trending in each specific country.
Japan is quite mature in mountaineering. For China, they have another trend on the trail run. Because of the niche market, we can have a stronger connection with this group of people.
Garmin's sales started to grow again, with most of its increases coming from wearables. But in the same year, the sector would see yet another revolution: the smartwatch. We are living in the era of the quantified self, a term coined by Gary Wolf in 2012.
So if we want to act more effectively in the world, we have to get to know ourselves better.
And this pursuit of data-driven self-knowledge dates back centuries. The ancient Greeks kick-started it with the long-regarded proverb of knowing thyself. Fast forward to the 1500s, this Italian physician brought us the idea of weight watching, famously building a chair to monitor his weight changes through food ingestion and discharge. Benjamin Franklin kept a record of his sins. The electrocardiogram was invented, allowing us to monitor our heart rate. The digital revolution of the 20th century renewed our interest in self-tracking, giving us the first global positioning system, or GPS. Bluetooth and Wi-Fi was born. All this paving the way for the burst of wrist wearables in 2013, ready to cash in on our curiosities.
Being able to take data from a device and present it in the app and do all of the analysis on your phone and have that all at your fingertips, that really kicked off other players also coming into that space. It was a crazy time. There was a lot of devices coming out and updates were coming thick and fast.
It's the year of the fitness band wars. Nike pushed out the first wrist-worn, smartphone-connected activity tracker, FuelBand. Jawbone released the Up, putting chic in what mostly looked geek up to this point. And Fitbit was still on the clip-on.
So we realized that people wanted to show off the fact that they're wearing this type of device. So the wrist was the next logical real estate for us to try to tackle.
This is a new wristband style product, Fitbit.
We took our DNA of still being relatively unobtrusive, but meeting people where they wanted to have something that could still show off, hey, they were embarking on this journey of health and fitness.
Despite being late to the wrist party, Fitbit flexed. The first wristband with inbuilt Bluetooth, seamlessly connecting data from device to device via its own app and operating system, giving users very little reason to take the band off.
It was sleek, it was small, and it produced loads of data about yourself. You know, the app was good, and it was really the coming of age Fitbit that we all know and love today.
So Nike and Jawbone were still specifically targeting a higher end user, athletic oriented, and we had a laser focus on people who just were trying to get started out and necessarily weren't fit. Our laser focus on that set of users and their needs, I think, really allowed us to succeed despite some of that early competition.
Fitbit's devices accounted for 68% of trackers sold in 2013.
I got my Fitbit Flex.
Together, Fitbits, Jawbone Ups, and Nike FuelBands accounted for 97% of all smartphone-enabled activity trackers sold throughout the world that year. Garmin, however, was nowhere to be seen in the mass market.
Garmin really did want to move in more to the generalist segment. The generalist offering was becoming more sophisticated. Consumers were increasingly demanding better capabilities.
While tech companies were busy targeting the fitness wannabes, Garmin was still focused on the hardcore athlete. The products pushed out in 2013, like the Phoenix, Tactics, and Quatix, were all far more complex trackers at a completely different price point.
We still want to maintain a higher value so we can have a little bit more profit to allow us to develop better and better product in the future.
Launching a year later than the rest in 2014, Garmin's answer to the new kids on the block, the VivoFit, the lightest wellness tracker in the world.
It has 1 year of battery life, so you never have to charge it.
In addition, the device nudges users with a bright red light when it detects us being that sedentary couch potato for too long. To keep up the momentum, Garmin released VivoSmart shortly after. This would be the first time in wearables where fitness band meets smartwatch.
It had the form factor of the tracker wristband, but had a wraparound OLED screen which was designed to show notifications and information on the wrist in a way that those early fitness trackers hadn't. The problem was just the form factor, really. It wasn't easy to read, the screen wasn't that great. Yeah, it really didn't crack the problems that we were seeing in fitness trackers at the time.
Despite the flaws in form, the mass market move worked in Garmin's favor. Activity trackers boosted the company's wearable shipments by 60% in 2015. It also educated the market on what was possible. But how did our wrists become such prime real estate? Well, the agents who seized this opportunity were the Europeans, who migrated the act of telling time to women's wrists with built-in clock bracelets. But it would be World War I that brought watches into the age of the wrist, far more practical than pocket watches when in battle. Ever since then, watches have found their permanent home, and they do more than just tell time.
This truly wonderful gift will be a constant reminder of your friendship and the help you've given me.
2015 saw the entry of a formidable innovator, one that would challenge, yet again, the fundamentals of what we wear on our wrist.
Apple just did what Apple does best. Smartwatches weren't new, they weren't really a new idea. but they were still being done badly. Apple brought a dose of style, it brought a bit of desirability, and as soon as they came to market, it just immediately put pressure on all of the incumbents.
Apple Watch was set to shrink the fitness trackers market considerably. Tech players in Asia were quick to catch on. Huawei, LG, Asus all released a smartwatch in the same year.
Chinese smartphone manufacturers are very good at taking features on a spec sheet and putting them on their spec sheets by just putting the sensor onto their device. Where they're less good at is actually making the data meaningful, but they're going to sell a lot of devices.
The level of competition rose quickly. It sort of legitimizes the sector that they're in because you have these big companies and there is an emerging consensus about what customers are wanting from these products.
Smartphones on wrists were a hit, which set into motion the slow farewell of screenless, appless fitness bands. After all, there's only so much real estate on the wrist.
So initially, there was a lot of fear and uncertainty. Something James and I missed originally was we didn't put the clock on our very first clips. We're like, you have a cell phone, this is in your pocket, who cares about time? Single most missed feature, so don't miss the small things.
Fortunately, Fitbit had the means to compete in the smartwatch showdown, thanks to the company successfully raising more than expected in their IPO in June of 2015.
It was very much eyes on Fitbit to see how it would respond, and it did take quite a while to respond, and when it did, it was with the Fitbit Blaze.
It was a device to compete directly with the Apple Watch. They doubled down on their sleep tracking prowess, detecting whether you're in light, deep, or REM sleep. Armed with a larger screen, Blaze displays calls, texts, calendar notification alerts from a connected smartphone. Fitbit's first attempt at an all-in-one smartwatch.
The Fitbit Blaze was just a Fitbit device with a change of form factor.
The housing is just kind of silly, makes it like super bulky. It just looks bad, I think.
Yeah, it told the time and did all the standard Fitbit tracking, but it didn't really excite and it wasn't a big hit. And then it was forced back to the drawing board.
I don't know that a good strategy would have been to try to take on Apple in any way. It was really more about how do we figure out where our core competence, how do we figure out our niche and make sure that we're the best competitor in that category.
To Fitbit's benefit, the Apple Watch was still finding its feet.
It's a minimum $700 to share my heartbeat with my lady.
The watch is completely frozen in this state.
No.
Fitbit sold more devices than Apple and Samsung combined in 2016.
We were able to recover and still sell and be successful because, health and fitness was a primary component of our watches that we launched, even from the very beginning. So where we ultimately saw this whole smartwatch category evolve to and ultimately become successful is when companies started to make health and fitness really the leading benefit of these devices.
The shift the entire wearables industry would take would bring about fiercer competition than ever before, and Fitbit's lead was to be challenged again. It's taken only 2 years for wrist-worn fitness trackers to evolve into smartwatches. Fitbit went from a clip-on with stepping functions into a wireless wrist device tracking your calories and sleep. Garmin went from producing devices for niche athletes to the mass market, and Apple went from smartwatch flop
the Apple Watch isn't as intuitive as I would like it to be,
to gaining the upper hand with their Series 3. They improved their health and fitness game, developing heart rate monitoring features, and added rings that indicated how close you are to your fitness goals. But wait a minute, these features sound familiar.
They say imitation is the serious form of flattery. They basically really pivoted to kind of be more health-centric, and it became more of a holistic health story, which was kind of the narrative we actually wanted to tell all along. But because Apple helped validate that in the market, it helps us expand the overall market and get the message out better.
Fitbit is Fitbit. It's synonymous with step tracking and sleep tracking and all those things. So Apple has had to very much play catch-up with Fitbit on those. So yeah, it always has that advantage, but it's just not really managed to translate those into the smartwatch form factor as easily as Apple did.
It took Apple just 2 years to take over Fitbit's leading spot on the market, shipping 17.7 million watches, 2% more than Fitbit in 2017. Time wasn't on Fitbit's side, and it couldn't be left to its own devices.
It needed the expertise in the company to create apps for its smartwatch, which is a big focus, and it also wanted great battery life. It went out and bought Pebble, which was very much so it could really get apps onto its platform. The second company was Vector, a Swiss-based smartwatch company, which had made really interesting advances in terms of battery life and the power consumption.
Fitbit dropped $38 million on 2 acquisitions in just 2 months. In late 2017, Fitbit debuted its first true smartwatch with its very own operating system, the Ionic.
Fitbit Ionic wasn't quite as finished and polished as an Apple Watch, and it didn't produce as much data about you as a Garmin. It's sort of halfway house between the two, and I think it didn't carve out as much of a niche for itself as Fitbit was hoping.
The Ionic had all the smartwatch ambition, but lacked in execution. They quickly reiterated, and 8 months later, brought us Versa.
I think the Versa was really where the technology it acquired was put to good use and had more of the features that people were looking for.
We feel like sleep is extremely important. You know, if you don't sleep, you're not going to perform well as an athlete. You're much more likely to get into car accidents. If you want to avoid metabolic disease, cold, you need sleep. And so that 5+ day battery life was probably one of the key technology innovations we actually brought to that larger form factor.
Having developed technology in sleep for over 10 years, it would be Fitbit's biggest advantage over rivals. After the launch of Versa, Fitbit's market share rose by 10% that quarter, compared to the year before. It would also be the catalyst for the entire market's progressive shift towards consumer health.
Because you always think that you have you're sleeping 8 hours, but in real life you're just sleeping for 5 and waking up 20 times a night.
I like that my smartwatch can calculate the calories that I'm burning and my heart rate during exercise.
I mean, the Fitbit was only for tracking my sleep, Apple Watch, my pulse.
Fitbit has been a pioneer of health features and was probably a visionary in the idea that consumer wearables can be health devices, but is now one of many companies in a race to bring big, meaningful health features to the wrist. Apple led on ECG, for example, where it was first to market with ECG on smartwatches, and Fitbit followed in that area.
Fitbit released their own ECG-enabled version, the Sense. It also gave users features to track and manage stress.
What health means has evolved. And originally it was like, you saved my life and I'm now more fit. Then it was like, we started getting, especially when we started having heart tracking, you saved my life because I saw this condition. That was really rewarding. But in some ways, as technologists, it was kind of demoralizing because people had to self-discover this. So I think the next step for Fitbit and health is really using a combination of artificial intelligence and kind of pattern recognition and research to be able to tell you things and give you insights.
Fitbit is looking to transform healthcare with data. Instead of a system that focuses on being reactive, the company wants to provide tools through the use of AI to be proactive, especially when it comes to the health of our heart, sleep, and wellness.
And I think artificial intelligence is going to be important and ideally personalized. How do I build the ERIC model? How do we build that right model for each of us as individuals? And that's where I'm really excited to see the technology going.
And Fitbit's ability to do so just got better. Google acquired Fitbit for $2.1 billion in 2021. This merger gives Wear OS the much-needed resources, tech know-how, and more importantly, health-related data to compete with Apple.
When we say we want to help everyone in the world healthier, we really mean everyone. And to me, I'm excited because that's really now truly possible with the resources and advantages of Google and Fitbit working together.
And Fitbit will need all the muscle it can get. With the market's shift into the medical paradigm, the highly competitive smartwatch market is expected to more than double in the next 5 years, with small wearable players like Garmin contributing even more growth.
We don't just follow the market trend to produce the product which maybe not so popular today. Yeah, but we can have time to understand the technology deeper, so we can always provide a better solution to the market.
Ahead of today's trend, Garmin had already developed technology to track health markers for athletes early on. They developed optical heart rate monitors in their Forerunner series in 2005. While blood oxygen trackers are the rage in spec sheets now, Garmin had these features in their Phoenix 5 series back in 2018.
Part of the appeal was because it's synonymous with adventurers. The idea of tracking blood oxygen is much more natural and interesting to those who are perhaps camping at altitude.
Now, as consumer-grade wearables move into healthcare, Garmin wants the upper hand, to be a leader in analyzing data. In 2020, Garmin acquired leading heart rate analytics company FirstBeat from Finland. Besides Garmin, it also develops and analyzes algorithms in wearables belonging to the likes of Huawei, Casio, and Xiaomi. Now, Garmin holds that power.
FirstBeat have the better algorithm to monitor and understand the health-related technology. We have an index such as VO2 max. We have an index called body battery. The modern lifestyle, people more and more focus on their own health.
Garmin's kept control of all of its processes, and I think that's just been a really smart idea because it stopped its IP being so readily copied and retained so much of its core features. So they've always been keen to keep technology within Garmin, and I think that's been to their benefit.
Armed with FirstBeat's advanced performance analytics for stress, recovery, and exercise, Garmin pushed out the Venue 2. It's outfitted with heart rate sensors and blood oxygen trackers. It measures sleep, stress, hydration levels, breathing patterns, and even menstrual cycles. Designed to be the constant companion.
The Venue really brings together a lot of Garmin sports tracking, sort of jack of all trades device, but brought crucially an AMOLED screen. Garmin are now listed up there in the top 5 smartwatch manufacturers. So yeah, they're doing something right.
I would say Venue series would be one of our superhero products. We have a longest battery life, more than 1 week.
While the Venue 2 is a smartwatch, it has limiting texting functions, lacks voice assistant and call functions, but the move was deliberate, staying true to their core user base, who want that breakaway from their smartphone and are committed to their active lifestyle.
What is really great in terms of what Garmin's been able to do is keep their core capabilities in terms of manufacturing, in terms of their technological capabilities, and they're really able to leverage that. And growing that niche is so important, especially as these two streams of the specialist market versus the generalist market merges more and more.
One of the major races in terms of wearables now is blood glucose tracking and doing that non-invasively. It's going to be such a huge game changer for not even diabetics, but all people, for understanding the effect of food and nutrition on the blood. Once these features land on wearables, I think we'll have an even closer relationship with our wearable tech than we do even now.
If you look at the smart wrist wearables we have today versus the gadgets we had a mere 20 years ago, we've come so far. From being just a digital pedometer on the wrist, to a supercomputer, to now, a product that provides legitimate medical value. And the wonder of it all is that it still has so much in store.
The holy grail of wearables is a device you shouldn't ever leave the house without. The fact that you would really be stupid to be without one, that is now on the horizon, and that's what I'm most excited about, wearables.
Ultimately, it's about helping hundreds of millions of people around the world become healthier through the use of technology. So I think it's good to see multiple companies invest so much money into making this category a really, really big thing around the world.